Hey, hi, how you doing? It's Jim, and welcome to a video. It's what day is it? It's Monday, and as promised, I'm actually not by myself today. I'm having a chat with my brother. Now, as some of you eagle-eyed may have noticed or listened, eagle-eared that would be. I have been a guest on my brother's podcasts, and I thought it'd be nice to return the favour, return the compliment, and have him on to have a little chat. So, without any further ado, hi Chris, how you doing, my brother?
Whoop, whoop, whoop. You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm cool on the gang. What are you up to?
I'm just back home to a very chilly house because the heating's been off, which was a textbook error. But because I've been away all weekend, listening to jazz at the London Jazz Festival.
Birthday celebrations, I believe.
Yes, it's very exciting. So the good people at Sirius put on the EFG London Jazz Festival for me every year. Sort of
just
10
for
days. You. Yeah, 10 days, 300 concerts, just in homage, in tribute to the great day.
Ah, man alive. So I suppose for the benefit of anybody who might be watching and have any sort of passing interest, we ought to sort of have a little chat about who we are, where we come from, a bit of background. So as you all know, I'm Jim. I've been making videos on YouTube for about 3.5 years, listening to all sorts of different sorts of music, and along the way that's embraced sort of all sorts of rock, prog, metal, jazz, avant-garde, classic rock, hip-hop even, classical. So really sort of the broad gamut of everything. And as well versed as I think I am in music, there's a lot that I don't really know and understand. I'll be the first to admit that. And Chris, you very much are, if not the expert, you are the in-house expert in the Newstead house on the genre jazz. And to the point where you
I love the fact that we might have in-house experts in our family. Well, I'll take it.
So obviously Lottie, our sister, is the go-to expert on all things classical and Baroque, Renaissance, classical and romantic, as in sort of orchestral music. And you very much are of the jazz persuasion, and me, I went off in a sort of altogether sort of filthier, dirtier rock and roll route. So
yeah, I mean, for the record, you're the oldest. Lottie's in the middle, and all that was left was jazz.
So you were picking up the sort of pecking at the sort of the bare bones of what was left.
Yeah, correct. I mean, obviously, I think I won the genre battle, so to speak. But yeah, so like my story, I was just into music as a kid and all sorts of things. But I mean, I genuinely got into Dixieland jazz when I was really little, like 6 or 7, and got a load of 78s in the house from like the 20s and 30s, and listening to all this Sidney Bechet and Louis Armstrong. And then got a clarinet, and
as you do.
And I got the clarinet because I wanted to play Dixieland jazz clarinet. And then as I got a bit older, I'm like, oh well, look, the cool kids are playing the tenor saxophone. I'll obviously play the saxophone next. And then sort of took it from there. But I never became professional in my musical aspirations, and it's not something I do battle with particularly, but it's like I just always loved it, but I never had. And I think I had too much breadth in my interests to focus solely on one thing.
Yeah.
Which is no criticism, obviously, of anyone that does focus on one thing, because I mean that's magisterial and brilliant. But I knew quite early, like about 17, that if you're going to be a professional musician, that is it, almost to the exclusion of everything else. Yeah. And there were just too many other good things going on. So I think I sort of fell off the jazz bandwagon for a few years. But then got dragged back onto it and haven't looked back since.
I have to say, I think I have a memory of us sort of growing up, and actually even beyond that, maybe when I was in my mid-20s and 30s. So actually, it sounds a long time ago now, but it's not really. And I think at that stage, perhaps you weren't into it. So I remember you being massively into jazz at school. And then you went to uni and you started to live life and do other things and sort of grow and develop and took on all these other sort of influences and things that were happening and were not necessarily into jazz, or maybe you were sort of secretly, but not sort of talking about it or sort of doing much about it. But I do realise that probably in the last sort of 10 years, it's suddenly become sort of forward and central in your sort of whole sort of being and the drive in your life. So is it live music which particularly sort of brought you back into it? Because I think you started going to Ronnie Scott's, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's particularly live music. I think if you've had something in your youth, like let's say you were really good at football and then you got an injury, I think it can take you a while to sort of come back to something and then just enjoy watching football again or whatever it may be. And I think in my 20s, musically, I was just listening just to loads of different stuff, but with no sort of particular persuasion. And jazz was in there, but it was still the only music, apart from the odd bit of classical organ music or an amazing symphony, that really made the hair stand on my arms. But I always kept it at a distance. No, I don't know why. Like, I was worried about being absorbed by it too much or it taking over, which is a bit of a daft thing because it is, I have no choice. It courses in it's the bit that connects my brain and makes everything sort of make sense and makes me happy and helps me process stuff. But yeah, absolutely. In the last decade, I've really just sort of got over myself a bit and just listened to everything for all the right reasons.
I think your description of saying you're specifically saying jazz connects your brain to the rest of you and makes life make sense. I think that's the same for a lot of people, but with music generally, and it is the sort of the driving life force that keeps us all sane and keeps us going, and sort of at times gives you solace, and at other times it gives you the spur to get on and do things. And you can, if everything else around you is going to crap, at least you've always got music as a thing to fall back on, and that's like a comfy blanket you can wrap around, isn't it?
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, though, isn't it? Just as you're talking, I'm thinking about what you just said, though, at the beginning, like Chris is a jazz expert and Lottie's into classical and you're into rock, etc. But, they're pretty useless terms because actually you're into everything, right?
Yeah,
it's just you tend to revisit those things that give you the good emotions. And if you can then link them together, right, by similarity, then it's like, okay, well, that's what I'm into. I think broadly... And I've yet to meet a jazz musician who isn't into pretty much everything. And it's not even about whether it's good, just the joy of music. And the particular sway. It's like saying, I'm obviously into sports. And you watch some of the great sports players, they know more about golf than the tennis that they're expert at or whatever it may be. You have to have everything, don't you? But it's an interesting space. I mean, on the podcast, you, Lottie, and I spent a lot of time... thinking about genres and whether it's useful or not, and ultimately it's just a nice exercise to talk skippage.
Yeah, and it's as useful as a library having labels to stick certain sort of books in, isn't it? And it is. If you read, you tend to read a whole broad gamut of stuff, and it's the same with music. It really is. So, but saying that, jazz is, by definition, a genre in its own right. But I know what it is. If you hear music, and it sounds a certain thing, that's jazz. So I mean, it might be something amazing and incredible, sort of like Miles Davis, sort of really innovative and exciting, or it could be like something quirky, which is the theme tune to Frasier, sort of a throwaway sort of thing. But that's definitely jazz. But what is it? What is jazz? What makes it jazz?
Yeah. No, hold on. Before I talk about that, you just remind me of something. So, many years ago, I was chatting to the choral director. I do this because I feel like I'm directing or conducting. Anyway, choral director of the choir at Eton at the school.
How did that happen?
It was very good because I'm very fancy. Just like a residential singing course in youth. But it was really interesting because he was obviously a very highbrow musician. But he also was like composing very, very simple advertisements and ditties. When you said like a Frasier thing, I remember him he was like composing a little jingle for Nescafe at the time and whatnot. you know, and the team or whatever who wrote the intel, or whatever all these things are.
Yes.
I find that terribly interesting. You know, it's like sometimes I'm sure it's just happenstance and pot luck, but I'm pretty sure there's quite a lot of complex music behind something that's so reduced.
It is. Those little minuscule sound bites.
The earworms of our life.
Well, they're 4 notes or 6 notes, say. Or it's just a chord. Like, so when you turn on your computer, it goes jing. And that's been copyrighted, isn't it? And no one else can use that. And it's the same with the Intel dun 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 dun. But you know what it is.
Yeah, we've just done ourselves all sorts of licensing problems by singing it twice.
Exactly. I'm going to be sort of I'm going to have a
hounded by Intel
slammed all over this now, and it'll be monetized by everybody apart from Jim.
Oh, absolutely. So. You're right. Now I can't even remember what the original question was. I got so excited.
What is jazz?
Well, that's a very good question. And I'll tell you what, I was reading a bit of a. I want to criticise anyone because I'm sure. So what should I say? But I was reading just a generic post on Facebook relating to London Jazz Festival, and there was, you know, sort of a set of people were going, it's not jazz, or it's not British jazz, or it's not this. And I was like reading it through, going, yeah, right, or whatever. You know, we must all believe what we believe and have our opinions. But I was sort of then thinking, hold on. I mean, ultimately, isn't it a bit of a facetious thing? Or maybe it was deliberately so provocative. But, you know, anyone that proclaims to define jazz or defines any of these things is obviously missing the point. Jazz has its origins in being a melting pot of musical styles that came together at a very specific point in a nation's identity, relating very much, obviously, to the story of the Black American at the turn of the century, building on blues, and in my opinion, proving a point that this was a music that was very specific to a set of people and a set of circumstances that wasn't conforming to a more Western canon of what classical music should be, or who could do it, and actually develops to a point where you can't play this, but you can emulate it and you can copy it, but pushing forward boundary again and again and again. And so at the time you had sort of ragtime and jazz spelt with a double S, and it was sort of at 1910 in that New Orleans period to 1920, I guess, and King Oliver and some of these marching bands that really took on took a very different path from music that had been at that point. Yeah. And did create a genre, created something that people could identify and relate to and go, hold on, this is different. If we learn to do this and this and combine these instruments, with the very clear cornet or trumpet part, and then the introduction of a steady beating drum, and then slowly the introduction of a bass line, which was often blown as opposed to strung. And then you could put on the clarinet and then the banjo. But again, even these instruments were rarefied at points. So yeah, a lot of it was sort of brass based at the beginning. But yeah, like anything, it evolves. And I think because it did have its origins there in New Orleans, and it was related to the story of slavery, and it was related to a story of of conditional life, and what it was to be excluded in America at that time. And arguably, obviously, for many people still today, which is not, it's not even a space or topic for me to talk about. But the music I can, and I know then how it develops, and I see the spread of it through, Kansas up to Chicago to New York, and then this classical music of America takes a nation and takes in people from all backgrounds and morphs and develops. And that's why I find it such an exciting journey, because there's like anything, right? But over time it's like, oh, jazz is dead, or there's been no good jazz since bebop, or jazz died in 1958 or whatever. It's just rubbish. Those phases have ended, or those phases have stopped, or the person who was most anonymous has died, or they've moved on to something else. Miles Davis, there's a reason Miles Davis is like a lot of people know the name, because he kept redeveloping, right? And so he was never satisfied to stick within a thing. Once he'd done his bit, he'd move on to a new thing and a new thing. And I think that's very much the story of jazz, and why I find it endlessly interesting.
Yeah, no, and I think that musicians that sort of find a formula and milk it and keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, it gets boring, doesn't it? It really does. Yeah. So it's
absolutely
revisiting and revamping and redoing the record that they've made 70 or 80 times before, and it's just okay, it's the same thing, it's the same speed, it's the same instrumentation.
I think it depends how you use music. Thinking about what you just said about it getting boring. So like, I play in a New Orleans street band, you know, in London, our own take on what we think might have been being played in the 20s, but it's obviously influenced, if you even just hear our improvisations, by another 100 years of music, you know, from all backgrounds. But it's very repetitive, you know, in what we play. But I don't think we play it to break new ground musically. We play it because it brings joy,
and
we play it
a nostalgic
others,
sort of thing, isn't it?
It's not a nostalgia.
Is it not?
No, because it's a fresh take on something, right?
Right. Okay.
And so it does sound new and vibrant and alive. And you know, it's not though wildly innovative, and it's not for any of us answering, you know, for helping us find an answer to the ills of society. It might give us, you know, a bit of catharsis personally, because it's just like a nice thing, isn't it, to play in a band?
Yeah.
But I was just thinking about doing the same thing again and again is actually what a lot of professional musicians do day in, day out. And, you know, the point of repetition doesn't necessarily equate with it not being a satisfactory experience. But of course, to what exactly what you're saying, that of course music, I think, needs to innovate and remain fresh, and that will obviously upset people en route, because it's like, oh, I just got used to that. What's this? This isn't jazz, or this isn't rock music.
Yeah.
What
there's a whole argument thing going on in the music community about progressive rock and progressive metal, and the very sort of title of that means it's music that progresses. It moves forward, and it's written there on the can. It does what it says on the tin, sort of thing. It's and then people. Several artists quite recently have released records which have not been to the liking of the sort of the audience that so far has been following them. So actually, oh my god, this doesn't actually sound like 12, 15-minute long guitar pieces that were written in the 1970s anymore. So it's not prog. So actually, it's not progressive music from the 1970s. No, exactly. This is now 2021.
They'll be watching this for years, this video. It's now 2038.
So it's, I think people have a hankering and a love for a nostalgia, which I'll come back to that word again. It's that's a comfort blanket, because people love what they've grown up with, and it's always there, and not always everybody is wanting to embrace change and look for new things. But
I don't think Rod Stewart would have sold a concert ticket if it wasn't for nostalgia.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? People go very much to hear stuff, and they put on that record from the past.
No one would go to see an AC/DC concert expecting to hear something with saxophones and with a.
I mean, I remember. Do you remember when George Michael opened the Olympics in 2012? Or closed it. I can't remember. I think he might have closed it. He sang at it anyway.
I actually do not remember him being at it one bit.
He was. Okay. And he stood there in the middle of the field, so I think it might have been the closing one. Oh, who cares when it was? It was the Olympics. And someone will probably say, no, it was 2000. But he sang a couple of songs that we'd all know and recognise, but one of the three was a new song.
Yeah.
And I think at the time he was, lambasted for saying, "What on earth are you doing, playing a song that no one knows?" And I think he was almost like, "Huh? Of course I'm going to play something new. A, it's an enormous audience, but B, I'm a musician. I'm not just going to play something that everyone already knows." And for him, absolutely, and the hugest of stages, it never felt to him an uncomfortable decision to want to play something new and fresh. But of course, it upsets people who just want to hear freedom or whatever.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Very much so. But carrying on this sort of whole what is jazz? I mean, it's a pointless sort of exercise, really, in some respects. But it's quite interesting to think about bands now that people have in their mind as being one thing that actually, you know what, it probably is jazz to one extent or another. So things like Osric Tentacles,
right?
Who are very proggy, space rock, really, really interesting instrumental music. But if you sort of kind of think about it, it probably is quite modern jazzy as well, isn't it? It's weird, and people don't really think about
it is. It's incredibly fluid, right?
Yeah.
I think country bleeds into blues, and blues bleeds into jazz. Jazz bleeds into rock, and it's all cyclical.
Yeah.
And of course, underpinning all of it, you can take a jazz tune and you can put a wonderful orchestra behind it, and you go, oh, that's classical, or whatever. But actually, now you've got me thinking about Osric Tentacles. Very exciting, because like Turkish psychedelia is a massive genre, which I think most comfortably sits beyond its own genre of being Turkish psychedelia into jazz, because its freedom, the way it plays, the ways it pushes out, I think will make sense to more ears that go, I'm into jazz. But actually, the rock guys as well, I think they would get it. Which is why, I think Osric Tentacles, if you get off your high horse and go, oh, it's like sort of space rock or something I don't quite get, you're like, no, it's just wicked music, isn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly. That's the whole point. Everything is music, and you like what you like, and you pick and choose from different things. So, you're very, very fortunate in your position. You get to go to a lot of jazz. Jazz is hugely sort of important in your life and in your sort of close circle as well. But you're in the process of putting together something quite big next summer, aren't you? Or next spring, a festival of your own.
I certainly am, Jim.
Tell me all about it.
The Watford Jazz Junction. I think it's scratching an itch across various things. One is my sort of impresario. So I used to put on bands and stuff at university.
Which you did loads of them, didn't you?
Yeah, which would include some jazz, but it would include all sorts. We had Ronnie Size and Portishead, and all sorts of people would come through the bar.
Good stuff. Yeah.
It was wicked, but everyone was sort of fluid and cool, man. It was lovely, but I sort of missed that part of my life of putting on bands as well as being in them. And then, where I live in Watford, as happenstance or luck or chance, or actually I realise it's pretty obvious why a lot of jazz musicians live here, but we've got lots of professional jazz musicians living in Watford and the Watford area, and actually lots of amateurs as well. But chatting with them, it's like, why did we never play in Watford? Because there's 100,000 people here, but the long and the short of it is because no one's ever done it. It's quite a lot of time and effort to do it. So in that sense, I feel like I'm taking one for the team. But on the other hand, it just feels really nice and an opportunity to connect people. Fingers crossed if it works. If not, it's just one of those glorious pilots.
It's absolutely.
We learned something.
So it's going to run across a few days, isn't it?
It will, 19th to the 22nd of May. And we're going to sort of throw the mud at the wall and just see what floats the boat, I think, for local people. But we'll have the National Youth Jazz Orchestra on the bill for our opening night concert. And they'll have Tim Garland playing with them, who is a local musician who was in Chick Courier's band for 17 years, a fantastic British tenor and soprano, just broadly a saxophonist, right? But with a pretty hot musical pedigree. Then we'll put on Shri from Badmarsh and Shri. So his amazing musician Shri with his
bass is an incredible bass player, isn't he?
Yeah, but he was obviously massive drum and bass pioneer at the time in the late 90s.
That's all so interesting as well. We go back to this jazz thing, but all of these a lot of these modern sounds, modern drum and bass, jungle. We were talking about trip hop, with Portishead and Goldie and who else was it? Ronnie Size. We're talking
Ronnie
about
Size, yeah.
That's all got huge sort of influences from that whole jazz sort of.
Of course,
stuff
it all gets sucked in. It's interesting. So Shri came to Britain from Bombay. not with jazz in mind particularly, not with drum and bass in mind or anything, but these things just sort of work, don't they?
Yeah,
and it's like,
yeah. It's quite interesting. I was chatting with him. I was chatting with Sri. Actually, it's probably about a year ago. I stuck a photo of I think it was Number of the Beast or something onto Instagram of a record I was listening to, an Iron Maiden one, and he was chatting to me. He said, "Oh, when I was growing up and I was learning bass, this was absolutely a sort of pinnacle of what I could do. If I could learn to play as fast and as accurately and as percussively as Steve Harris, then I'll know I'll have made it." And he absolutely strived to do it. I don't know if he ever quite got there, but he said it was just such a massive influence on him at that young age, and I think it still carries him through with him now. He sort of loves that music. But
Maiden don't come up as often as I would like them to on my podcast amongst jazz musicians, but interestingly, like Deep Purple, Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin all do, and yes,
slightly earlier, isn't it?
People really, that has been part of their their formative years and whatnot. Anyway, so we'll have Sri playing, but we'll have him playing with with Dennis Rollins, a fabulous trombonist, and then a local pianist called Ilario Ferrari, who's Italian. And so we'll have this sort of opening night concert of a smorgasbord of stuff, but to sort of hopefully appeal to lots of different ears.
Yeah.
And then as the sort of festival develops, we'll have fantastic Emma Smith, who's won third of the Papini Sisters, which is very nice, beautiful singing if you know it. Well, you've reviewed Emma, haven't you?
I put her video up on the channel. I don't know if it's this year or it might have been right at the beginning of this year.
Whatever. But yeah, there's not many people that can sing like Emma with just such force and control and brilliance. Yeah, just one of those proper gems of the British scene. And what else do we have? We've got a jazz brunch, and we've got a
jazz
fringe
brunch.
Event, jazz brunch. We're sure it's a jazz brunch.
The food's named after trumpets and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like cream horn and all of that. Hey! But yeah, no, the Saturday is probably our peak festival, and we'll have a concert that I'm calling Connect with Something New, which I guess if you're really into your jazz will probably be the most interesting concert.
Yeah.
So we'll have Archipelago on there, who are a free jazz trio. We'll have a chap called Samuel Sharp, who plays saxophone on loop pedal and creates these amazing, lyrical, bouncing, otherworldly soundscapes. And then fingers crossed we'll also have Delhi Cleaver, who's a fantastic singer-songwriter and sort of representative of that jazz, that younger jazz scene that's really coming through in London, that isn't comparable, her own person and her own vibe. And so like a concert that you can drop into, hear that, and then in the evening we'll have a Tomorrow's Warriors takeover at the local nightclub. And for people that don't know Tomorrow's Warriors, they are an absolute beast of power behind the resurgence of UK modern jazz in the last 10-15 years. Some fantastic musicians.
What are they called again?
Tomorrow's Warriors.
Tomorrow's Warriors.
It's a play. So, like, I imagine a fair few people have heard of Courtney Pine and the Jazz Warriors back in the 80s. And so, Tomorrow's Warriors is a sort of evolution of that, or a play on that. But they're a jazz education outfit in essence.
Yeah.
But their alumni are fantastic. So, some just brilliant players who've come through those ranks, who are still playing with them. So. Who knows who they'll bring to the club, but it will obviously be well sick. So yeah, I mean that's it in a nutshell. Just a variety of stuff to see what people are into.
Yeah.
Some other bits and pieces, obviously thrown in around the edges, but yeah, we shall see, and hopefully people will dig it and they'll go, oh, I'm not quite as scared as jazz as I thought I was.
There you go. Are you going to do anything at all online, or is it all literally it's going to be you go there to be in person? It's
I think. There's a little bit of me that's going, if you want it to be successful, you have to do the digital element, right? But there's another bit of me, which currently, certainly at this point when we're recording, is saying, because we can and because we haven't been able to for 20 odd months, I want it to just be a live thing, because I've done so much online stuff.
I get that totally.
And it's like, and I don't think it sullies it. It'd be amazing if it was filmed and all that.
Yeah.
But there's just something about, it's almost like a selfish act of going, you were part of that, and it wasn't
sticking
captured,
your fingers up at
streamed.
COVID, and
just going, no, this is, and that's the point of it. The whole reason I want to do a live festival is to get people out to connect with each other again, and to do those things, and to share in that experience. And I appreciate, because I had COVID and I was in hospital.
Yeah, you were
and
poorly, weren't you?
Cannot tell you how amazing it was to be able to connect with people who I would never see or meet by watching concerts and streams online. It's a lifesaver. But I think in this particular opportunity, I'm going to go the other way. But I should imagine in future years, I will very much stream.
Yeah.
But if you're watching the Watford Jazz Junction next May and it's streamed and I've gone into partnership with Amazon, whatever. But I've obviously sold out. My point being that it's not my driver at the minute. But obviously, if I can stream some stuff, it'd be wicked.
Good. Well, I think if it's all right, I think we'll probably sort of start thinking about sort of wrapping things up now, because we've been sort of nattling and.
What? I was just about to get going.
Oh, we've been going for about 35 minutes now.
I was going to tell you about the Zakir Hussain concert last night. I saw the Azar gig. I saw the Charles Lloyd concert. I saw the Damon Locke's Black Monument Ensemble concert. I saw. I've seen a lot of good jazz recently.
Are you getting this, listeners? Are you getting this? Right. What I'd like to propose is that not sort of every week, not every month, but we have some sort of regular sort of dialogue like this and have a chat, and maybe you bring some music to the channel, something to introduce some of the audience, my regular audience, to some new music, because I think you'll be able to suggest some stuff that I've got no idea about, and it'll bring some fresh perspective to it. I'm doing this already. I'm sort of asking people who are brave enough to come on here like this, do a sort of a one-on-one chat, and to introduce their piece of music they really would like to share on the channel, and to talk about why it's special to them. So that'd be great for you to do. Next time we do this, to sort of have a piece that is really important for you and why it is, and to have a chat about it.
Yeah.
And then
that'd be wicked.
So we can listen to it live as we go, sort of thing. That'd be quite cool. Whoop whoop whoop!
Oh man,
but,
I think many opportunities.
Yeah, but so we'll do that next time. So whenever that is, who knows? But mate, thank you so much for coming on. It's been really good to have a chat. I know we sort of we chat sort of fairly routinely anyway, but it's not like this. Not a sort of a proper sort of in-depth sort of back and forth discussion.
And what a great privilege to be your first guest, inaugural guest. The Virgin Territory has been plundered.
I wouldn't. Yuck. I wouldn't necessarily say it's been a great. Well, it's been a
great success of a conversation. No. Cheers, James.
No. I didn't mean it in that way at all. Being on my channel is kind of not a privilege for you, matey. But I'm glad you've come on. Thank you so much. It's been great to have you. Really, really good to chat. So, if people want to find out more about the Watford Jazz Junction Festival, they want to find out more about your podcast.
Yeah.
Visit
www.
All the W's.
All the W's. And then if you go to watfordjazzjunction.com, you can see some spiel about what we're doing here. Watford.
I'll put a link to it in the bit below as well.
And if you put the podcast link in as well, you'll hear more interesting people than me talking about jazz.
And more interesting people than me. There's some properly good episodes on there. I've listened to, I wouldn't say I've listened to all of them, but I've listened to a great deal of them, and I think they are very, very good. Very insightful and interesting. And it does not matter that they're jazz musicians. It has no bearing on the interest that you may or may not have from it. It's just so interesting to hear these people talking about music and why it's important to them and how it drives them. I think it's wonderful. I think it's such a great series. So thanks for doing that as well. It's good.
Cool, man.
Yeah. So there we go, Chris. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching. If you've stuck it for this far, it's a long one, I know. Hope to see you on the next video whenever and whatever that is. And until then, this is Jim, over and out.